Welcome to CP Newsroom. I'm Nicole Lamenzi. Joining us today is Chad Veach, a pastor on staff at the City Church in Seattle, Washington, which also happens to be one of the most unchurched states in the U.S. Welcome, Pastor Veach.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on.
All right, so what do you think about that? You live in a state where people aren't too hot on religion.
Yeah, well, you know, we're not hot on religion, but we are hot on winning Super Bowls. So we're the champs.
Okay.
We made it.
Okay.
Seahawks. But yeah, I just think it's an opportunity for us. We don't look at it as a negative per se, as much as the harvest is ripe. Unchurched people, they haven't been in church because they don't know how good it is, and not necessarily how good church is, but how good God is, who He is, how much He loves them. So we're actually seeing, even though the statistics aren't favorable, we're actually seeing churches explode. We're seeing church plants and leaders being raised up because there's such a response that we're seeing in our area of the world to the gospel and the good news. It's actually really exciting. So when we hear people say, you guys are the least church, we say, you got to come out and see us, though. God's doing amazing things in our area.
Okay, so the cup isn't half empty, it's
No,
half
it's
full.
half full. We're on the rebound. And the Seahawks are proof of it.
Okay, and you and your wife, you also live near a university campus.
Yeah.
So you minister to college-age students.
Yep.
So what are the things you're hearing? What's some things that are keeping people maybe away from church?
Well, I think, yeah, we're on the University of Washington. So there's 40,000 college students right there and a lot of other different universities. And I think the thing that we hear the most is, wow, I didn't know church could be like this. I didn't know it was this exciting. I didn't know this atmosphere existed. I didn't know the gospel was this good. So the thing that we keep hearing isn't the negative of how much we're losing or how much people don't like it, as much as there's just, it resonates with people, the atmosphere of faith and the presentation of who Jesus is. I think we just try and, my pastor is a guy named Judah Smith. He's the greatest preacher on the planet. He says if we make much of Jesus, He will make much of us. And that's kind of just the heartbeat of our church and what we're passionate about is we're here to make much of Jesus in our city, in our state, in our nation, in our world. And I think the reason why God will give influence to a church was because we're just dead set on serving people, loving people, and making much of Him.
Okay, so speaking about that influence a bit, I mean, of course you take it seriously, but not every area you go to is the same. For example, you're here in New York City right now at the Misfit Conference. Yeah. So, I don't know, do you feel you might have to tweak things a bit, or is it one message all the time, you can deliver it the same way?
Well, I think, the number one rule of a communicator is to know your audience.
Right.
So wherever you are, you kind of, try and read the room and who's there and what's the ethnicity, what's the socioeconomic background. Yeah, you got to speak the language of who's in front of you, but I think you come into a space like New York City and it's a melting pot of culture and so much history, one of the most influential cities in the world. You sense that, you feel that, and there's liberties that you could take here in New York that, Seattle maybe a little bit more PC, we're a little more Google, Amazon, Microsoft, a little more cookie cutter. You go to New York, you let your hair down a little bit. Yeah, anything goes. You sense that a little bit, but yeah, that's anywhere you go. If you're in the South, you play by those rules and so on and so forth, because I think ultimately whenever you're speaking somewhere, again, the goal's not to make much of who we are. So if you're a prohibitor, if you're a stumbling block for people to hear the message, something's wrong. Ultimately, we're there to serve. And so, but yeah, you try and just read the room.
Okay. And it seems to be a big push now, or maybe a re-emphasis on grace. Yeah. And that Christianity is not about you trying to actually work it out on your own. So how do you balance that when you're preaching and discipling people, not to just abuse grace or their freedom in Christ?
Yeah. Well, I think, the reality is that grace is full of truth, and truth is full of grace. And so I think we're always trying to present the whole gospel of who Jesus is. I think people maybe in the past were put off by Christianity and who God was presented to be because it was behavior modification. And the whole thought of, you got to behave before you belong. You got to believe before you belong. And I think we're trying to flip the whole thing and convince people you belong way before you believe. Jesus modeled that. He modeled that with the woman caught in adultery, with the woman at the well, with Legion, with so many people he interacted with. They were just, Zacchaeus, let's go eat a meal.
Right.
Before he ever believed, he belonged.
True.
And so I think we're trying to teach people that Jesus is that gracious, that he is not an angry person or figurehead that people have thought he was, that he's actually a person that accepts us for our failures, our shortcomings, and by the way, the Bible says that our righteousness is as filthy rags. So there is no such thing as us getting to this spot of behaving or having these morals or ethics that would present ourselves as worthy to come to church or even be a leader. That all of our life and righteousness is found in this person. So I think we're trying to present that guy, who Jesus really was, the one that interacted with Levi and Matthew, and why these guys, Peter says, we've left everything. He's, you know, Jesus is like, you guys want to leave like these crowds? Peter goes, where are we going to go? You alone have the keys to everlasting life. And I think Peter had a revelation, a thought of, it gets no better than following this guy. And so I think when people understand the grace that is in God, it teaches us truth at the same time. I think it was in Titus, Paul wrote, the grace of God has revealed itself, and it teaches us to deny ungodliness. So grace is a teacher. Grace is not a card I wear. Say I could do whatever I want, say whatever I want, watch whatever I want. The more I understand Jesus, I want to be like him, and it teaches me to deny ungodliness. So it's actually the opposite of a license to sin. It's actually an instructor on how to live a pure and righteous life.
Okay. And so you're among a generation of young pastors, young leaders who are not the tie and suit jacket generation, right?
But we would look good in some suits and ties. You have to admit.
When are you going to give it a try?
Yeah, maybe in a couple years. I got to grow up a little bit.
Right. So even things like that, you know, you dress how you feel like dressing, what's comfortable to you. But some people say, oh, that's a distraction, or they even make assumptions within Christianity that to be hipster, to be trendy, or, you know, the skinny jeans. Like, like there's something wrong with that. So how do you kind of deal with that stuff?
Well, I just think, you know, you're always going to have naysayers. You can always have critics, but perhaps the ones that aren't criticizing are the ones we're trying to reach. So I think you just got to take the good with the bad. These guys are listening to us because they can relate with us, and there's no pretense, and they kind of look at you like, you're normal. And we get that a lot, like, you're a pastor? No way, you're a pastor. And that's a compliment, because if they peg me as a pastor right away, all these walls go up, and right away I'm working from a disadvantage. Maybe it's a past hurt, maybe there was an offense, maybe they have a preconceived notion of what that's supposed to be. So I think it's working again to our advantage. But I think we want to be tasteful, and you know, we're not trying to dress crazy. This is just who we are. And so I think it works for us.
I
the skinny jeans are working for me.
They're not working for you? Okay.
Yeah, they are working for me.
Oh, they are? Okay, cool. Okay, so, you know, you travel a bit, you speak in different places. So I don't know, what kind of trends have you been noticing as you travel and preach and interact with people? Trends maybe that you think are good and great, but ones you find kind of troublesome.
Yeah, well, I think the good and great ones is that the church has gotten better. Our worship is way better. Our media is way better. The leadership, I think, and that's God, right? Everything always improves. Everything always advances. It only gets better and better with Jesus. So I think the good trend we're seeing is everywhere we go, God's doing something special. So it could be in the South, it could be in the Northeast, it could be in the Midwest, wherever. God is obsessed with his people, and he'll do anything to reach them. And it doesn't matter the methodology or the philosophy. It doesn't even matter the denomination or the theological background. God's reaching his people. So I think that's the good trend. I think that the troublesome trend would be people that are wanting to fall in love with their method and not willing to change. So I think, you know, just a kind of a leadership thought there would be, what got us here is not going to get us there. So I think the only thing that would be troublesome is if you know, there would be any churches or leaders that aren't trying to lean into the next generation of leadership of saying, how do we reach young people? How do we reach young adults? What are the new methods? What are the things that again, the gospel's not tired.
Right.
But people are tired of tired presentations of the gospel.
Yes.
So I think the only thing troublesome would be maybe leaders that haven't really leaned in to the young people of the church. And I think the church is only as strong as the next generation.
Right.
So if we have a gap of that, we're going to miss out on that window. So that would be the only troublesome thing.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Pastor Chad, for your insight on, being a leader, a ministry leader in today's generation with all the complicated issues going on.
Yeah, well, thank you. Come up to Seattle and see us.
Seattle Seahawks, right?
Yeah,
okay, home of the champions. I might take you up on that. Thank you for tuning in to CP Newsroom. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please write to us at cpnewsroom@christianpost.com. Take care.